Hello, friends, and welcome to today's episode of this podcast series where I share a favorite poem with you every day. The poet I'm going to read today is Arun Kolatkar. His collection of poems, Jejuri, is now considered a masterpiece. This is set in a place called Jejuri near Pune, which he visited, and the poems are set there. Published by New York Review of Books. This is one of the greatest collection of Indian English poems, and undoubtedly Arun Kolatkar is one of the greatest Indian English language poets who we are very proud of. The poem I'll keep Jejuri's poems for some other day because they require a separate discussion altogether. How he uses metaphor, how he uses images, and the way an entire place comes to life, a temple town, Jejuri, comes to life. I'd rather read his poems which are set in Mumbai. There is one poem which is in the 20th century Indian poets anthology by R. Parthasarathi, edited by R. Parthasarathi, where there is this poem called Boat Ride, The Boat Ride, which is a brilliant poem. It is about a boat ride in the Arabian Sea, where different people, there is a couple, there is a child, all of these are described, and it's basically a boat ride in Mumbai where they see the gateway of India. The poem ends with the sight of the gateway. If possible, I'll read it today or some other day if this read does not go for too long. The main poem I want to read today is The Ogress. The Ogress. This is another poem set in Mumbai, this time set inside the Mumbai slums, and this poem is a part of the 60 Indian Poets anthology edited by Jeet Thayil. I'll read the poem, the Ogress. It's a little long poem. That's the reason I was skeptical of reading The Boat Ride, which is another very long poem. This poem is called The Ogress. One side of her face, the right one, is human enough, but the other, where the muscles are all fused together, burnt perhaps, or melted down with acid, I don't know which, is all scar tissue, and looks more like a side of bacon. The one-eyed ogress of Rope Walk Lane, one breast removed, hysterectomized, a crown of close-cropped, moth-eaten hair, grey, on a head half covered in a scarecrow sari, has always been a kind of an auxiliary mother, semi-official nanny, and baby bather in chief to a whole chain of children born to the street. Give her a bucket filled with water, a bit of soap, and an unwashed child. The dirtier, the better. And a wispy half smile that always plays on the good side of her face loses its unfinished look without completing itself, and she gets a wicked gleam in her right eye as she starts unwrapping her gift, the naughtier the better, and she's never so happy as when she has a tough customer on her hands and she has whisked his nappy off, like now, for example. Soap in eye, a furious, foaming boy, very angry, very wet, cradled lengthwise and face down on his spindly legs, extended jointly and straight out before her. She sits on the edge of the pavement, facing the road, sari pulled up to her crotch, and her instruments of torture within easy reach, an empty sky blue plastic mug bobbing up and down gleefully in a bucket of water. As grown-up fingers soap him, grab ass, scrub and knead his flesh, the headlong boy, and stopped by the woman's feet pointing skyward, nose down between her anklets and restricted by her no-win shins, is overrun by swirling galaxies of backsliding foam that collide, form and reform, slither up and down and wrap around the curved space of his slippery body, black as wet slate. She turns him on his flip side and, face clenched, He kicks her in the crotch, starts bawling and shaking his fists at the world. But she grabs both his feet with one hand, crumples his face, pulls his ears, tweaks his nose, probes his nostrils, twists his arms, polishes his balls, plays with his pintle, and hits him with 3 mugs full of cold water in quick succession. The water cascades down his sides, it slushes down her legs that form a bridge over a lengthening river of bath water, flowing down the curbside like frothing star broth that will be swallowed up by a rat hole, waiting for it further downstream. And after the flood, when the ogress lifts him up in the air and sets him down on solid ground, dripping wet, but all in one piece, feeling a bit like little Noah, bow-legged and tottering, he stands, supported by an adult hand, under an armpit, but still on his own 2 feet, and a street fighting man already. When the ogress throws a towel over him and starts drying him, he nods unsteadily. He nods unsteadily, for he is still not quite able to balance his head, looks around at the whole honking world that has massed its buildings menacingly around him, and he already knows what his response is going to be. He points his little water cannon at the world in general, and right, piss on it, boy, shoots a perfect arc of piss, lusty and luminous in the morning sun. Such a powerful description of a woman, of a nanny, the ogress giving bath to a child. such a powerful poem. It reminds me immediately of a poem from Arun Kamal, Hindi poet's first collection, Apni Keval Dhar. In that he has a poem called Snan Parv, where he actually talks about how a worker, a farm worker, is taking bath in a body of water. Again, very powerful. And Snan Parv, it is titled in a way, chapters are titled in Mahabharata and Ramayana. So it actually takes that simple bathing of a worker to great heights in the faculty of poetry. I think we have already reached 8 minutes into this podcast, but I can't help the itch of reading The Boat Ride. I'll read it anyway. This episode will go a little longer, but since we are reading Arun Kolatkar, and this is another of his brilliant pieces, The Boat Ride. The long hooked poles nose the nooks and crannies, find flaws in stonework of grappling with granite, ignite a flutter of unexpected pigeons, and the boat is jockeyed away from the landing. After a pair of knees has shot up and streaked down the mast after, the confusion of hands about the rigging, and off-white miracle, the sail spreads. Because a sailor waved back to a boy, another boy waves to another sailor. In the clarity of air, the gesture withers for want of correspondence, and the hand that returns to him, the hand his knee accepts as his own, is the hand of an aged person, a hand that must remain patient and give the boy its part of time to catch up. Frozen in a suit, the foreman, self-conscious beside his more self-conscious spouse, finds illegible the palm that opens demandingly before him. The mold of his hands broken about his right knee, he reaches for a plastic wallet. He pays the fares. Along the rim of the boat, lightly the man rests his arm without brushing against his woman's shoulder. Gold and sunlight fight for the possession of her throat when she shifts in the wooden seat, and the newlyweds exchange smiles for small profit. Show me a foreman, he says to himself, who knows his centerless grinding, oil-fed salt bath furnace better than I do, and swears at the seagull who invents on the spur of the air what is clearly the whitest inflection known, and what is clearly for the seagull over and above the waves a matter of course. The speedboat swivers off, leaving behind a divergence of sea, and the whole harbor all that floats must bear the briny brunt. The sailboat hurls its hulk over burly rollers, surmounted soon in leaps and bounds. A gull hitched on hump, the long trail toils on, bringing to every craft a measure of imbalance, a jolt for dinghy, a fillip to a schooner, a swagger to a ketch. And after the seawall, scabby and vicious with shells, has carved the surge, after the backwash has reverted to a bulk of water, all things that float resume a normal vacillation. Winds bargaining over his shrunken head, the mousy patriarch overgrown with grandchildren classifies a ship, first asserts and then proves to the newest generation that seawater is salty. With the authority of age you'll get, he tells the youngest, wet, so putting in a nutshell the dire consequence of falling in water. The child cogitates while the eyes of his contemporaries are already riveted. Proudly to the Portuguese ship they learn the Indians captured. His wife has dismissed the waves like a queen, a band of oiled acrobats. In her shuttered eyes move in dark circles. If her shuttered eyes move in dark circles, they move against her will. Winds, like the fingers of an archaeologist, move across her stony face and across the worn edict of a smile cut thereon. Her husband in chains is brought before her. He clanks and grovels. Throw him to the wolves, she says, staring fixedly at a hair in his right nostril. Impatient with the surrounding gallons of boredom spurning the rowdy intangibles of waves, a 2-year-old renounces his mother's ear and begins to cascade down her person, rejecting her tattooed arm, denying her thighs, undaunted by her knees, and further down her shanks, devolving, he demands balloons, and balloons from father to son are handed down. Closer to keel than all elders are, and down there, honored among boots, chappals, and bare feet, he goes into a huddle with the balloons, coming to grips with one, being persuasive with another, and setting an example by punishing a third. Two sisters that came last when the boat nearly started, seated side by side athwart on a plank, have not spoken. Hands in lap, they have been looking past the boatman's profile, splicing the wrinkles of his saline face and loose ends of the sea. Familiar perspectives reoccupy a cleanlier eye. Sad as a century, the gateway of India struggles back to its feet, wobbly but sober enough to account for itself. Details approach our memory. Ingratiatingly, we are prepared to welcome a more realistic sense of proportion. A wind comes carrying the microbe of a melody, where the sea jostles against the wall. Vacuous sailboats snuggle, tall and gawky, their masts at variance. Islam, Mary, Dolphin, their names appearing. Music, a black back turned on all the waters of the Arabic Sea. A man plays on a bulbul tarang, alone in the last boat and facing the wall. The boat courses around to sidle up against the landing. The walls sweeps by, magisterially suspending the music man. An expanse of unswerving stone encrusted coarsely with shells admonishes our sight. I can't help but read one more of Arun Kolatkar's poem, which is a much simpler read. It is not that difficult a read, but a much more it is there in a different anthology. I'm sorry. Yeah, this poem. This is in the 12 Modern Indian Poets anthology by Arvind Krishna Mehrotra, and this is actually a very, very peppy poem, very much more interesting poem, so to speak, and direct. This poem is called Biograph. This is like an autobiography that Arun Kolatkar has written for himself. Biograph. It's a relatively short piece, a one-page poem. I'll just read this poem quickly and end without any discussion, just to give you a glimpse of what Kolatkar actually is. Biograph. Knotting the cord, the midwife said, "It's a boy, it's a boy, it's a boy." Piercing an earlobe, the goldsmith said, $2, just $2. Syringe in hand, the nurse said, "It's not gonna hurt, not a bit." Measuring my dick, Baban said, "Mine's bigger, bigger than yours." Punching my back, Baban said, "My dad can lick your dad." Kicking my shin, Baban said, "Sissy, a sissy, what a sissy you are." Pressing her toes against mine, Bunny said, "Bicycle, bicycle, let's play bicycle." Rubbing spittle on my tummy, Bunny said, "Doctor, doctor, let's play doctor." Tickling my ribs, Bunny said, "Come on in between the sheets." Boxing my ears, a teacher said, "How much is 33 times 38? Rapping my knuckles, a teacher said, "And where's Sheffield then? Where's Sheffield?" Squeezing my thigh, a teacher said, "Let's go to the mango grove." Twisting my neck, the barber said, "Don't move now, don't move." Measuring my chest, the tailor said, 31 inches, just 31. Forcing my foot into the shoe, the cobbler said, "Use it and it won't be so tight." Jumping on my back, Junior said, giddy up, giddy up." Giving me the boot, my boss said, "I can't help, Mr. Nene, I just can't." Grabbing my cock, my wife said, "I'll chop it off one day, just chop it off." Feeling my balls, a doctor said, "Hydrocil, I'm sure it's hydrocil." Sticking a pin in my toe, another said, "Leprosy, you can take it from me, it's leprosy." Tapping my stomach, a third one said, "Ulcer, ulcer, no doubt about it." Stepping on my toes, a guy said, "Sorry man, I'm sorry." Sticking an umbrella in my eye, another said, "I hope you aren't hurt." Bearing down on me, full tilt, a trucker said, "Can't you see where you are going, you motherfucker?" That's Arun Kolatkar for you. One of the greatest world poets in my opinion, and certainly one of the greatest Indian English language poets from India. So do read more of his work. Do get a copy of Jejuri once the lockdown is over, once you can get a copy. And this is certainly one of the most beautiful collection of poems. I have not read anything from this collection yet, which I intend to sometime soon. So yeah, thank you so much for being a part of today's long episode. But I hope you got to hear some very good poems. Do read Kolatkar, look him up on the internet. There are a lot of his poems available there. And stay safe and take care. And tomorrow we'll meet again with a new poet and a new poem. Thank you so much.